Money doesn't make you powerful. Knowing what everyone else is willing to ignore makes you dangerous. That's what the man standing 50 stories above Chicago understands better than anyone alive. His name is Dominic Russo, and tonight he's about to lose control of the only thing that matters, though he doesn't know it yet. The penthouse windows stretch across the entire east wall, floor-to-ceiling glass. Beyond them, Lake Michigan spreads out like hammered steel, reflecting a sky that's turning from gold to ash. The sun is dying, and Dominic watches it happen with the same controlled expression he uses for everything. A man who's learned that feelings are the first thing that gets you killed in his world. His office smells like aged leather and something else, something that costs more per ounce than most people's monthly rent. On the desk sits a single crystal glass filled with amber liquid. On the walls hang paintings that museums have tried to buy. In the corner, a Rolex sits beside a phone that connects to people who've never met face to face, but understand each other perfectly. This is the kind of power that doesn't need to speak. It just needs to exist. Dominic adjusts his cufflinks. Italian silk, custom-tailored. Everything about him says someone has decided exactly how much space he deserves in the world, and everyone else has learned to make room. His gray hair is swept back. His jawline still cuts like a blade even at 58. His eyes are dark, the kind that people describe differently depending on whether they like him or fear him. Most people do both. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious. Where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The phone on his desk buzzes. Not the special one. The regular one that connects him to the real world. His secretary's voice comes through, careful and measured. The way people sound when they're delivering information they know someone doesn't want to hear. Mr. Russo, the car is ready. The drivers are in position. The caterers have confirmed all dietary restrictions, and security has cleared the ballroom. He doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he takes a slow sip of his drink. The taste is clean, expensive, the kind of thing people use to mark important moments. Tonight is important. Not for the reasons the city of Chicago thinks. Not because of the children's hospital benefit being announced. Not because of the tax write-offs and the charitable donations that will wash across every news station by morning. Tonight matters because it's the night his federal indictment officially arrives. The U.S. Attorney has been working on this for 3 years. Dominic knows because he pays people to tell him things that nobody else is supposed to know. 6 weeks. That's how long he has before the charges land. 6 weeks to position himself as a legitimate businessman, a family man, a philanthropist. 6 weeks to make sure that when the cameras point in his direction, what they see is a man building futures for children, not dismantling them. He sets down his glass and walks toward the window. Below, Chicago unfolds in a grid of lights and streets. Somewhere down there are the people he's helped. Also somewhere down there are the people he's hurt. Neither group is going anywhere. Power doesn't work that way. It just keeps compounding, getting heavier, dragging you deeper. The thing about being Dominic Russo is that everyone knows your name. Judges know your name. Politicians know your name. Federal agents know your name and have a file on you that's probably thicker than a phone book. Banks don't ask questions about your money because they've learned that questions lead to complications. Shipping companies process your cargo without inspecting it too carefully. The thing about being this powerful is that everyone participates in your success because everyone has something to lose if they don't. But tonight, in the penthouse above the city, there's something else happening. something he can't control with money or favors, or the kind of quiet phone calls that make problems disappear. Tonight his youngest son will be at the gala. 5 years old, autistic. A secret that Dominic has kept locked away like contraband, hidden in the top floors of this building, hidden from the business associates, hidden from the rivals, hidden from the media that's always watching. Dominic's jaw tightens slightly, just barely perceptible. The kind of movement that most people would miss unless they were trained to watch for it. His fingers curl into a fist, then release. Control. That's the word that defines him. That's what he built his empire on. The ability to control every variable, every outcome, every person involved. But 5-year-olds don't understand control. They don't understand the Russo family code. They don't understand that perfection is non-negotiable, that weakness is unforgivable, that a disabled child is a liability that needs to be managed, not loved. The phone buzzes again. His driver this time. Confirmation that the car is downstairs, that everything is ready, that the night of optics and performance can begin. Dominic takes one last look at Lake Michigan. The sun is almost gone now. The water is turning black. And somewhere in the building, his youngest son is being prepared for a night where nobody will look at him, where he'll be positioned in corners and shadowed by staff members whose job is to ensure he doesn't embarrass the family, where the collective decision has already been made. This child is invisible. What none of them know, what Dominic can't predict with all his money and influence and careful planning, is that invisibility is about to become the most powerful force in the room, and it will start with someone asking a 5-year-old boy to dance. That's when everything changes. That's when the whole careful structure of the Russo Empire begins its quiet collapse, and no amount of power can stop what's coming next. Sienna Russo steps out of the car, in a dress that probably costs more than most people's down payment on a house. Valentino. Custom-tailored. The kind of thing you wear when you're born into a family where everything is measured in designer labels and connections that money can't buy. She's 22 years old, and she's been trained since childhood to walk into a room and become invisible, while also being impossible to ignore. It's a skill that takes practice. A smile that says nothing while also saying everything. Eyes that look at you without really seeing you. The kind of beauty that's been packaged and presented as currency, because that's what the Russo family does with daughters who aren't groomed for criminal empire. The ballroom is already filling when she arrives. Marble floors that reflect the chandelier light like mirrors. Walls that have been painted a neutral color designed specifically to make everything else stand out. Tables are arranged in precise geometric patterns. Waiters in identical suits move through the crowd with trays of champagne and appetizers that cost more than the waiters make in an hour. The orchestral music plays from a string quartet positioned in the corner, Vivaldi's Four Seasons spinning through the air like it was written specifically for moments like this. Around the room, Chicago's most powerful people are pretending to be charitable. Judges who make decisions that change lives stand next to politicians who've been elected to represent people they don't know and don't want to know. Real estate developers who've built their fortunes on displacement and gentrification discuss children's hospital donations. FBI agents positioned strategically throughout the room pretend to be here as guests, but their eyes are always watching, always calculating, always looking for the moment when someone says something they shouldn't or does something that confirms what they already suspect. Vittorio is across the room, Sienna's older brother, 34 years old, groomed since birth to eventually inherit the criminal operations that supposedly don't exist. He's wearing a suit that cost more than a car. His hair is slicked back in a way that's meant to look sophisticated, but actually just looks like someone who's learned how to perform power without quite understanding what real power actually is. He's laughing with executives from the family's shipping company, which is absolutely a front. And they're all pretending that they're discussing legitimate business when actually they're discussing how much product moved through the port without being inspected by anyone who might ask uncomfortable questions. Sienna takes a glass of champagne from a passing tray and feels the weight of her entire life settle onto her shoulders like a coat made of concrete. This is what she was born to do. Exist in rooms like this, and smile, and deflect, and never ever ask too many questions about where the money comes from, or what the family business actually entails. She was never supposed to have ambitions beyond becoming someone's wife, or someone's pawn, or someone's decorative addition to a family that measures women's value in their ability to be useful, or beautiful, or both. She was never supposed to want more. She was never supposed to care. She was never supposed to develop a conscience about the things that her family did and didn't do. But 3 years ago, everything changed. 3 years ago, her youngest brother was born, David, and he came into the world with a diagnosis that the family treated like a death sentence, like a scandal, like something that needed to be locked away and medicated and controlled so thoroughly that he basically ceased to exist as a person and became instead a problem that needed managing. Sienna's mother couldn't handle it. Francesca Russo spent 2 years watching her husband treat their child like a defect that needed correcting. And then she spent 1 year leaving. Not technically a divorce, just a separation. Just a woman who'd had enough of a man who could orchestrate takeovers with his bare hands, but couldn't figure out how to love a child who was different. The absence of her mother in this ballroom tonight feels like its own kind of presence. Everyone notices that Francesca isn't here. Everyone knows why. Some of them judge Francesca for leaving. Most of them actually respect her for it, which is something they'll never admit out loud. Sienna moves through the crowd with the practiced ease of someone who was trained to navigate social spaces before she could read. She's mastered the art of seeming engaged while remaining completely detached. She can hold a conversation about nothing for hours. She can laugh at jokes that aren't funny. She can compliment the wives of powerful men on their jewelry while thinking about literally anything else. This is her world. This is what she was built for. Except it's not what she wants anymore. That's the problem. At some point in the last 3 years, watching her father treat her youngest brother like he was ashamed of him, watching her oldest brother prepare to inherit an empire built on cruelty and control, watching her mother choose to leave rather than participate in the collective denial anymore, Sienna stopped wanting to be the beautiful, compliant daughter of a dangerous man. She started wanting something else, something different, something that the Russo family code doesn't have words for. She wants to matter in a way that isn't about her face, or her connections, or her utility to someone else's plan. She wants to do something that actually means something instead of everything meaning nothing. She wants to be able to look at herself in the mirror without feeling like a ghost. A federal prosecutor approaches her. She recognizes him from the news. He's been in the background of stories about corruption investigations and white-collar crime. He doesn't know who she is, but he's had enough champagne that he's forgotten to maintain his professionalism. And so he compliments her dress and asks her about her father's business interests. Sienna smiles and deflects and says something clever that makes him laugh without actually answering his question. This is what she does. This is what she's good at. But while she's talking to a man whose job is to investigate people like her father, while she's pretending to be exactly what everyone expects her to be, she sees him. David, in the corner of the ballroom, dressed in a suit that costs more money than most 5-year-olds will see in their entire lives. His hair is combed back in a way that makes him look like a tiny version of their father. Except his eyes are different. His eyes are aware in a way that's separate from the world around him. They see things. They just don't see them the way most people do. And standing beside him like a bodyguard, like a wall between Davide and everyone else in the room, is Hugo, one of Dominic's most loyal lieutenants. A man whose job tonight is very specific. Make sure the boy doesn't do anything that embarrasses the family. Make sure he stays quiet. Make sure he stays invisible. Make sure the collective agreement to pretend he doesn't exist continues uninterrupted. Sienna's chest tightens. She excuses herself from the federal prosecutor with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. She weaves through the crowd toward that corner of the ballroom where her youngest brother is standing motionless, waiting for the night to end so he can go back to being locked away in the top floors of the penthouse like something that the family is ashamed of. And she's about to do something that will cost her everything. But she doesn't know that yet. All she knows is that she can't keep ignoring what's happening in front of her face anymore. All she knows is that somewhere between being the decorative daughter and being a person with agency, she developed a conscience. And that conscience is about to tear apart the only life she's ever known. The orchestra shifts into something new. A piece that Sienna recognizes but can't quite name, something classical and dramatic that fills the ballroom with urgency even though nothing has changed. The room is exactly the same as it was 5 minutes ago. The same people are wearing the same clothes and having the same meaningless conversations. But something feels different. Something feels like it's about to break. Dominic has entered the ballroom. That's what's different. When he moves into a room, physics changes. Light bends slightly in his direction. Conversations adjust their volume and content automatically. People straighten their spines without realizing they're doing it. He's wearing a suit that was probably hand-tailored by someone in Italy. Someone who only works with specific clients. Someone who understands that fabric and fit are how powerful men communicate without words. His expression is neutral. His movements are controlled. He shakes hands with judges and politicians and real estate developers. He accepts congratulations on his generosity. He deflects compliments with the kind of humility that tells everyone immediately that his humility is an act, and they shouldn't mistake it for weakness. He is Dominic Russo, and everyone in the room knows that his presence here is the event. Everything else is just decoration. Vittorio gravitates toward him immediately. That's what sons of men like Dominic do. They orbit. They wait to be acknowledged. They hope that the attention they receive might translate into power someday. Vittorio is learning the business. That's what the family calls it. Learning the business. Which means he's learning how to make people disappear, how to move products, how to launder money through legitimate businesses, how to recognize when someone is lying, and what to do about it. He's been in training since childhood for the moment when his father decides he's ready to take over. That moment is coming soon. Dominic is older now. His federal situation is getting more complicated. The transition will need to happen within the next few years, maybe sooner. The judges in the room are the ones who've already been paid. The politicians are the ones who understand how to look the other way. The real estate developers are the ones who benefit from keeping certain neighborhoods economically isolated so that property values stay depressed and profitable for developers who know people. Everyone in this ballroom is participating in the same system. Everyone is complicit. Everyone is benefiting, and everyone is also pretending to be here for a children's hospital. The irony is so thick, you could cut it with a knife, except nobody at this event actually notices irony anymore. They're too busy protecting their investments and maintaining their positions and making sure that the system that benefits them continues functioning exactly as it has been. Sienna watches her father work the room like he's a conductor, and the ballroom is an orchestra that exists only to play the music he wants to hear. She watches Vittorio perform his loyalty. She watches the judges and politicians adjust themselves based on Dominic's mood. She watches money move through conversations in the form of unspoken agreements and careful words that never quite say what they actually mean. And she watches the corner of the ballroom where Davide is still standing motionless. Hugo hasn't moved from his position beside him. The invisible wall around her youngest brother is so complete that people have literally stopped seeing him. The servers don't offer him refreshments. Other children don't wander over to talk to him. Adults don't include him in any conversation. It's like he's behind glass. Like there's a force field that only certain family members are allowed to penetrate. The music shifts again. Vivaldi, one of the four seasons. The orchestra is positioned just past where Davide is standing, and the sound is filling the space around him like water filling a tank. Sienna watches his hands start moving, small, repetitive motions, stimming, that's what the therapists call it, self-soothing behavior, the response to sensory input that's too much for his nervous system to process all at once. His body is reacting to the music and the crowd and the chaos of being in a room full of people who are all pretending that he doesn't exist, while simultaneously being acutely aware that he's there and that he represents some kind of family failure. She sees him looking up at the chandelier. His eyes follow the light as it refracts through the crystal. His whole body is rigid with the effort of managing the input. His breathing becomes shallow and controlled in the way that children learn when they're taught that expressing distress is not acceptable. Sienna feels something break inside her chest. Not dramatically, not like in movies. It's quieter than that. It's more like a structure that she didn't realize was supporting her entire weight finally giving way. She's standing in the middle of a room full of Chicago's most powerful people, holding a champagne glass that tastes like expensive nothing, and she's realizing that she cannot do this anymore. She cannot be complicit in this anymore. She cannot be the daughter who knows her family is destroying a child and does nothing about it. The federal prosecutor she was talking to earlier is 3 conversations away now, discussing something with Vittorio about Port Authority regulations. Hugo is still standing beside David. Dominic is still working the room, accepting compliments and making connections, and performing the role of legitimate businessman and family man. The orchestra is still playing Vivaldi. The servers are still circulating. The judges are still judging. The politicians are still politicking. Everything is exactly the same, except everything is about to completely change. And Sienna Russo is the only one who doesn't know it yet. She's holding the power to fracture this entire empire, and she doesn't even realize it. All she knows is that she's tired of being invisible while also being seen. She's tired of being useful while never being valued. She's tired of watching her youngest brother be erased like he's something shameful instead of something precious. She sets down her champagne glass on a nearby table. The move is small, unremarkable, but it's a boundary. It's a line. It's the moment before the moment when everything changes. And she walks toward the corner of the ballroom where her youngest brother is still standing, still stimming, still trying to manage sensory input that nobody around him understands or cares about. Dominic's eyes catch hers. There's a warning in them. Don't. A single word communicated in a glance. She reads it perfectly, because she's spent her entire life learning how to decode the language of threat and control that passes through her father's expressions. She reads it and understands exactly what it means. This is not your place. This is not your decision. Stay in your lane. But Sienna doesn't stay in her lane. She continues moving toward Davide, and the entire night, the entire empire, the entire structure that Dominic Russo spent decades building is about to come undone because one person decided that being complicit was no longer acceptable. The invisible wall around Davide is made of things nobody talks about. It's made of shame and fear, and the collective decision that a child who's different is a problem instead of a person. It's made of the space that adults intentionally create when they decide someone isn't worth including. It's made of the specific kind of rejection that nobody names but everyone understands. Sienna feels it the moment she gets close to her youngest brother. The way that people's bodies shift slightly away. The way that conversation happens around him but not with him. The way that he becomes a hole in the room instead of a person taking up space. It's not dramatic. It's actually very quiet. It's the kind of cruelty that functions through consensus and agreement. Everyone has decided together that Davide should be invisible. And the effort involved in maintaining that invisibility is actually quite extraordinary when you start paying attention to it. A woman near the appetizers sees Sienna approaching Davide and immediately pulls her daughter away. There's no conversation, no explanation, just a movement that communicates, "We don't go near that child." That's the understanding. That's the agreement. That's what the Russo family code demands. A business associate of Dominic's who was standing near Hugo actually takes a step away. Not dramatic, not obvious, just a repositioning of his body that places more distance between himself and Davide. That's the thing about collective cruelty. Everyone participates without anyone actually having to say what they're doing. It just happens, like gravity, like water flowing downhill. Sienna reaches Hugo first. His face is neutral, but she can see the calculation happening behind his eyes. He's trying to figure out what she's doing. Is she going to cause a problem? Is she going to do something that embarrasses the family? Is she going to break protocol? Hugo has worked for her father for 23 years. He understands how things work. He knows the consequences of allowing chaos. He knows that Dominic has rules, and the rules are very specific about how family members behave at family events. But Hugo also knows Sienna, knows that she's never been the type to follow protocol without question, knows that something about her has changed in the last few years, knows that looking at her right now, she's made a decision about something, and that decision is probably going to have consequences. Hugo steps aside, not because he's been ordered to, not because Dominic has given him permission. He steps aside because he sees something in Sienna's face that tells him this is happening whether he helps facilitate it or not. So he might as well get out of the way. Now Sienna is standing directly in front of David, 5 years old, brown skin, dark eyes, hair combed back in a way that makes him look like he's at a business meeting instead of a children's celebration. His hands are still moving, still stimming, the repetitive motion that his nervous system is demanding as a way to regulate. Up and down, up and down. The same movement over and over. That's what it looks like when you're trying to manage sensory input that's too intense. That's what it looks like when your brain is working twice as hard as everyone else's brain to process the same information, and you're using movement to regulate yourself because nobody's ever taught you a different way to do it. Sienna crouches down slightly, not invading his space, not trying to make physical contact, just existing at his level, meeting him where he is instead of forcing him to meet her where she is. That's the first thing that differentiates what she's doing from what everyone else has been doing. The first acknowledgement that he's a person with his own experience happening inside his own body. "Hey, you," she says softly. Her voice is quiet enough that only he can hear it. Quiet enough that it doesn't add more sensory input to an already overwhelmed nervous system. "Want to see something cool?" He doesn't look at her. His eyes are still focused on the light fixture. His hands are still moving, but his stimming slows down slightly, just barely perceptible. The kind of change that most people would miss. But Sienna's been paying attention to Davide for 3 years. She knows how to recognize the small signs that he's registering something. She stands back up. She looks at the orchestra. She looks at the string quartet playing Vivaldi. She looks at Davide. And she understands that the music is the thing. The music is what he needs right now. The music is the language that his nervous system is trying to respond to. "Want to dance with me?" she asks. There's a pause. The kind of pause where everything hangs. The kind of moment where the night could go in multiple directions, depending on what happens next. Davide is processing the question. His brain is working. His body is considering. And the entire ballroom is about to freeze because something is about to happen that violates every single rule that the Russo family has established about how to handle their youngest member. Davide looks at her hand. He looks at it for a long moment. He looks at his sister's hand, like he's trying to understand what it means. Like he's trying to figure out if this is something safe. If this is something he wants. If this is something that's actually being offered to him by someone who isn't trying to control him, or manage him, or make him into something smaller than he actually is. Then he takes her hand. And that's when everything changes. That's when the entire careful structure that Dominic Russo spent decades building starts its quiet, inevitable collapse. The orchestra keeps playing. The Vivaldi continues flowing through the ballroom like it's supposed to be the soundtrack to this moment, like someone composed it centuries ago, specifically, so that it would be here, now, in this room, supporting what's about to happen. Davide's hand in Sienna's hand. That's the connection. That's the beginning. That's the moment where the invisible becomes visible, and the ignored becomes impossible to ignore anymore. They start to dance. It's not smooth. It's not the kind of thing you'd see in a movie where everything is beautiful and coordinated and makes sense. Davide's movements are jerky and unpredictable. His body doesn't follow the rhythm the way that bodies are supposed to follow rhythms. He's not counting beats. He's not thinking about structure. He's just moving in response to what he's feeling and hearing and experiencing in the moment. And Sienna dances with him exactly as he dances. She doesn't try to correct him. She doesn't try to teach him. She doesn't try to make his movements conform to what's expected. She moves with him. She meets him in his experience instead of demanding that he enter hers. That's what makes it different. That's what makes it radical. That's what makes it a betrayal of everything the Russo family code demands. Conversations stop. Naturally. Not because anyone made an announcement. They just stop. Because something is happening that requires attention. The judges stop talking. The politicians stop posturing. The real estate developers stop discussing displacement and gentrification. The servers stop moving through the crowd. The FBI agents adjust their positions to get a better view. The entire ballroom pivots toward this corner where a young woman and a 5-year-old boy are dancing to Vivaldi. Phones come out, not because anyone planned to document this, just because phones are always out now, and when something happens that feels significant, people's hands move automatically toward recording. That's just what happens in the world now. That's just how things work. Dominic stands. His movement is controlled, but it's unmistakable. He's standing because he's about to intervene. He's about to stop this. He's about to restore order and protocol, and the understanding that certain family members are not meant to be seen. He's about to interrupt this moment and make it clear that this kind of visibility is not acceptable. He's about to demonstrate his power by controlling what happens next. But then, Davide smiles. It's not the kind of smile that's been coached or trained. It's not the kind of smile that's been adjusted for an audience or created for effect. It's an authentic smile, a genuine smile, the kind of smile that only happens when someone is actually experiencing joy instead of performing it. Davide is looking at Sienna, and his whole face is transformed by this smile. And in that moment, every person in the ballroom sees what they've been trained not to see. A child who is beautiful exactly as he is. The smile doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't request approval. It doesn't try to negotiate with anyone about whether or not he's worth looking at. It just exists. And in existing, it makes it impossible to ever pretend again that he's not there. In existing, it fractures the agreement that everyone made without ever talking about it. In existing, it changes the room forever. Vittorio's expression darkens. Sienna sees it happen. She sees her oldest brother's face transform into something harder, something more calculating, something that's understanding that this moment represents a challenge to everything he's been trained to become. Weakness is a liability in the Russo family. Compassion is indulgent. And what Sienna just did is absolutely both of those things according to the family code. What Sienna just did is a betrayal. But Dominic doesn't move anymore. His body goes still in a different way. It's like all the motion has drained out of him. Like he's realized something about the situation that changes his strategy. He's still standing, but he's not moving toward them. He's not stopping it. He's watching. He's calculating. He's understanding that the moment is moving past him, that the control he thought he had is slipping away, that something has just happened that he cannot undo no matter how much power he possesses. The orchestra keeps playing Vivaldi. The light from the chandelier keeps reflecting off the crystal. Davide keeps smiling. Sienna keeps dancing. And the entire ballroom holds its breath because everyone understands, in that moment, that they've just witnessed the beginning of something ending. They've just seen the first crack in a structure that was supposed to be impenetrable. Sienna realizes, as the music continues and her youngest brother's hand stays in hers, that she's about to destroy everything. She's about to lose her place in this family. She's about to lose her inheritance. She's about to lose her connections and her security and her position in the world as she knows it. She's about to become someone who chose compassion over cruelty. And in the Russo family, that kind of choice is unforgivable. But Davide is still smiling. And that smile is worth the cost. That smile is worth more than anything she's about to lose. That smile is the moment when she understood that visible love is the most dangerous thing in a world built on invisible cruelty. That smile is the moment when she decided that being complicit was no longer acceptable. That smile is the moment when power got redefined, and the definition no longer belonged to the man standing across the room watching his carefully constructed empire begin its irreversible fracture. The music reaches a crescendo. The dance continues. And everyone in the ballroom knows that something fundamental has just shifted. Everyone knows that the carefully maintained architecture of the Russo family has just been challenged by someone who was never supposed to have the power to challenge anything at all. Everyone knows that tomorrow morning the world will be different. But they don't know yet that the difference will be permanent. They don't know yet that one act of visible love will start a cascade of consequences that will unravel decades of carefully constructed power. They don't know yet that Davide's smile will become the moment when the most dangerous empire in Chicago starts its inevitable collapse. And Sienna, holding her youngest brother's hand as the Vivaldi swells around them, is about to find out what the true cost of compassion actually is. The music ends. The silence that follows is not quiet. It's the opposite of quiet. It's the sound of an entire ballroom processing what just happened, of every person in the room understanding that they've witnessed something that can't be unseen, something that can't be forgotten, something that can't be explained away in the morning when everyone tries to return to normal because normal is no longer possible. Davide's hand is still in Sienna's hand. The smile is still on his face. His body is still connected to the music, even though the music has stopped. He's living in an echo that only he can hear, and he's happy in that echo, which is the most revolutionary thing that's happened in this ballroom in decades. The first person to move is a federal agent positioned near the west wall. He pulls out his phone and texts something to someone, not recording, analyzing, understanding that what he just witnessed is going to be important to the investigation that he and his colleagues have been building for 3 years. Understanding that this moment, this fracture in the Russo family structure, is the kind of thing that starts to unravel empires. Dominic is still standing, still watching. His jaw is clenched so tightly that the muscles in his neck are becoming visible. His hands are at his sides, and they're forming and releasing fists without him seeming to notice that he's doing it. This is what loss of control looks like on a man who's built his entire life around never losing control. This is what it looks like when someone realizes that their power is suddenly limited by something they never anticipated: visible love. Hugo has moved away from his position. He's standing near the edge of the ballroom, his expression completely neutral. He's processing the situation and calculating what comes next. He's worked for Dominic for 23 years. He knows what's coming. He knows that consequences are about to be distributed. He knows that decisions are about to be made. And he knows that staying close to Davide is no longer his job because Davide is no longer hidden. Vittorio steps forward. There's something in his movement that's more aggressive than anything he's displayed before. He's seeing an opportunity here. He's seeing a moment where he can position himself as the one who maintains control, the one who preserves the family structure, the one who enforces protocol. He's seeing a way to emerge from this moment looking stronger instead of weaker. "That's enough," he says. His voice is loud enough to be heard across the ballroom. It's the first time anyone has spoken since the music stopped. It's the first acknowledgement that words are necessary again, that silence can't continue, that someone has to say something about what just happened. Sienna looks at her oldest brother. She's still holding Davide's hand. She hasn't let go. She doesn't plan to let go. She's made a choice, and that choice is irreversible now. "No," she says. Her voice is quieter than his, but it carries more weight. "It's not enough. It's not even close to enough. He deserves to be here. He deserves to be seen. He deserves to be loved." There's a moment where the ballroom collectively holds its breath. There's a moment where everyone understands that a line has been crossed that can't be uncrossed. There's a moment where power dynamics shift in ways that will take years to fully understand. And then Dominic moves. Not toward Sienna, not toward Davide. He moves toward the orchestra, toward the musicians who've been playing Vivaldi all night. And he makes a gesture that suggests they should stop playing. The gesture is small, but its meaning is enormous. He's ending the performance. He's ending the night. He's ending the appearance that everything is fine and controlled and exactly as it should be. But ending the music doesn't end what happened during the music. The dance already occurred. The smile already appeared. The choice has already been made. The ballroom transitions from celebration to confrontation in seconds. The orchestra members put down their instruments without being asked. The servers stop circulating. The judges and politicians begin calculating how close to the Russo family they want to be after tonight. The FBI agents continue watching, continue calculating, continue understanding that they're witnessing the moment when a federal case becomes prosecutable because the family structure is fracturing, and fractured structures leak information. Security moves in, not aggressively, just definitively, clearing the exits, ensuring that nobody leaves without being accounted for. That's what Dominic does when he needs to contain a situation. He doesn't remove the problem. He removes everyone else's ability to talk about the problem. Davide is still smiling. He doesn't understand what's happening. He doesn't understand that his sister just committed what the family considers an act of war. He doesn't understand that visibility is dangerous. He just knows that the music was good, and his sister was kind, and something felt different about this night than every other night. Vittorio approaches Sienna. He's walking with the kind of confidence that comes from being groomed for power his entire life. He's walking like someone who believes he's about to become the enforcer of family rules. He's walking like someone who has practiced having difficult conversations and believes he knows the script. "You embarrassed us," he says. "You embarrassed the family. Do you understand that? Everyone in this room just watched you decide that your personal feelings were more important than the family name." Sienna doesn't respond immediately. Instead, she looks around the ballroom. She looks at the judges who've built their careers on corruption. She looks at the politicians who've made decisions that destroyed neighborhoods. She looks at the real estate developers who've gotten rich by keeping poor people poor. She looks at all the people who've decided to prioritize power over compassion, and she understands something that Vittorio doesn't understand yet. They're all terrified. They're terrified because they just witnessed someone choose love over legacy. They're terrified because they're wondering if they still believe in the system that they've built their lives around. They're terrified because Davide's smile is making them question things that they stopped questioning a long time ago. "I didn't embarrass anyone," Sienna says. Her voice is steady. She's younger than Vittorio, but she sounds older. She sounds like someone who's moved beyond fear into something else, something harder. "I showed them that a child is worth looking at. I showed them that kindness is stronger than control. And yeah, I did that publicly, which means everyone in this room is going to have to think about what they saw. And I'm not sorry about that." Dominic has moved back into the center of the ballroom. His expression is still neutral, but there's something different about him. He looks diminished somehow. Not physically. Just diminished in the way that men who rely on power get diminished when they realize that power has limits. "Everyone needs to leave," he says to the room. His voice carries authority, but it's the kind of authority that's already starting to erode. "The benefit is concluded. Thank you for your support of the Children's Hospital. Security will see you out." People start moving toward the exits. The judges and politicians and real estate developers are all eager to leave, eager to be somewhere else, eager to distance themselves from what just happened. The FBI agents linger a moment longer, making sure they have all the phone numbers they need, making sure they've documented all the faces, making sure they understand who was present for the moment when the Russo empire started to crack. Hugo is gone. Sienna doesn't see when he leaves, but he's no longer in the ballroom. He's made his calculation and his decision. And his decision is to be somewhere else when this situation explodes completely. Davide is still holding Sienna's hand. He's watching the ballroom empty around him, but he doesn't seem frightened. He seems content. He seems like someone who got exactly what he needed and isn't quite understanding why everyone else is suddenly upset about it. Vittorio is still standing in the middle of the ballroom, watching the situation unfold. His expression is shifting from confidence to calculation. He's understanding that this situation is moving beyond his ability to control it through force or threat. He's understanding that his father isn't stepping in to enforce discipline the way he usually does. He's understanding that something fundamental has changed, and he doesn't quite know how to respond. Dominic walks toward Sienna. He stops a few feet away from her and Davide. He looks at his youngest son. For the first time all night, he actually looks at him. He doesn't look away. He doesn't look past him. He looks directly at him, and something in his face changes. It's subtle. It's not redemptive. But it's something. It's the look of a man who's starting to understand that the cost of invisibility might have been higher than the cost of visibility. "Go home," he says to Sienna. "Take Davide upstairs, put him to bed, and then we'll discuss what comes next." It's the first time he's acknowledged that Davide has a bedtime. It's the first time he's called him by his name instead of referring to him as the situation or the problem. It's not forgiveness. It's not acceptance. But it's something. It's a crack in the armor. Sienna nods. She gently pulls Davide toward the exit, toward the service stairs that lead to the upper floors of the penthouse. He follows her without resistance. He's done what he came to do. He danced. He smiled. He was seen. Behind them, the ballroom is nearly empty. Only Dominic and Vittorio remain. Only the two Russo men who are trying to understand how a 5-year-old child and a 22-year-old daughter just challenged everything they believed about power and control, and what it means to run an empire. And in that empty ballroom, with the lights from Lake Michigan reflecting off the marble floor, Dominic Russo is about to have a conversation with his oldest son that will change the trajectory of the Russo family forever. He's about to tell Vittorio things that nobody outside this family should know. He's about to explain why David matters more than the empire, or he's going to fail to explain it. And that failure is going to become the catalyst for everything that comes next. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what happens when this story continues. The fracture has started. The empire is cracking, and the real consequences are about to arrive. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, would you have done what Sienna did? Share your answer. Inspire others with your perspective. The penthouse hallway is silent in a way that hallways are almost never silent. Sienna and Davide move up the service stairs, passing floors where security personnel are maintaining their positions but no longer appear to be in crisis mode. The invisibility that surrounded Davide in the ballroom is gone, but it's been replaced by something else: attention, curiosity. The kind of notice that comes after someone decides that ignoring something is no longer possible. Davide is tired. The combination of sensory input from the ballroom, the emotion of the moment, the physical effort of dancing, has depleted him in the way that overstimulation depletes children. His hand is still in Sienna's, but his grip is looser now. He's moving slower. He's processing. They reach the top floor, the residential area, the part of the penthouse where David spends most of his time, kept separate from the business that happens below, kept separate from the decisions that get made in conference rooms and offices. His room is decorated in ways that are supposed to be soothing. Soft colors, minimal clutter, carefully controlled sensory input. It's the environment of a child who's being managed rather than a child who's being loved. Sienna sits him on the bed. She helps him take off his suit jacket. She unbuttons his dress shirt and helps him change into pajamas that are made of soft cotton. She performs all the actions of bedtime without speaking because she knows that he's at his limit for the day. She knows that words would be too much sensory input right now. She tucks him under the covers. She turns off the overhead light and turns on the soft lamp in the corner. She sits on the edge of the bed and does something that nobody in the family has done in years. She stays with him. She's present with him. She's not leaving him alone in silence and darkness the way everyone else does. She's choosing to be here. "You were amazing tonight," she says quietly. "Do you know that? You were the most beautiful thing in that whole room." Davide doesn't respond, but his breathing slows. His body relaxes. He's processing the day in his own way, integrating the experience in ways that adults will never quite understand, because adult brains work differently than autistic brains working hard to process overwhelming input. Sienna sits with him for another 10 minutes. Then she leaves the door cracked open so she can hear him if he needs her. She walks back down the stairs toward whatever conversation is about to happen in the office. Dominic is alone when she arrives. Vittorio is gone. The study is quiet except for the sound of ice shifting in a glass of amber liquid. Dominic is standing at the window, looking out at Lake Michigan the way he was doing at the beginning of the night. The difference is that now the sun is completely gone. The water is black. The city lights are the only illumination, and they reflect off the glass in ways that make it hard to see what's actually beyond the window. "Sit down," he says. He doesn't turn around. He's still looking at the lake. Sienna sits. She's nervous, but she's trying not to show it. She's afraid of what comes next, but she's also resolved about it. She made her choice. She's going to live with the consequences. "For 3 years, I've kept your brother hidden," Dominic says. His voice is quieter than it was in the ballroom. "I did it because I thought I was protecting him. I told myself that the world is too harsh for children who are different, that he needed to be shielded from rejection and judgment and all the ways that the world punishes difference. I convinced myself that isolation was protection." He takes a sip of his drink. "Tonight, you showed me something I didn't want to see," he continues. "You showed me that the harshest place for your brother wasn't the world. It was our house. It wasn't rejection from strangers. It was rejection from his own family. It was invisibility administered with intention. It was love withheld as a form of control." Sienna doesn't know what to say. She expected anger. She expected consequences. She didn't expect something that sounded almost like a confession. "Your mother was right to leave," he says. "I should have seen that sooner. I should have chosen differently when she asked me to." He finally turns around. His expression is different. He looks tired. He looks like someone who's spent decades building something and just realized that the foundation was rotten the whole time. "What you did tonight was going to cost you," he says. "I was going to punish you for it. I was going to make sure that choosing compassion over control had consequences. I was going to demonstrate that betraying family code has a price, but I can't do that. I can't punish you for being the only one in this family with actual power. Real power isn't about control. It's about the willingness to sacrifice everything for someone else. You have that power. You're the most powerful person in this family right now. Sienna feels something shift inside her chest. She's not getting what she expected. She's getting something more complicated. She's getting what sounds like acceptance from her father, but it's not the acceptance she wanted. It's too late for that. The federal indictment is happening. Dominic continues, "In 5 weeks, I'm going to be arrested. The charges are going to destroy what's left of my reputation. Vittorio thinks he's ready to take over, but he's going to discover that the empire doesn't exist the way he thinks it exists. Alliances are already shifting. Associates are already making decisions about distance. And your brother is no longer invisible. Which means the people who've benefited from his invisibility are no longer invested in protecting this family." He sits down behind his desk. He looks smaller behind it than he used to look. "You're going to have to decide what you want to do with the knowledge you just received," he says. "You can use it to help your brother. You can use it to help yourself. You can use it to try to help the family. But you can't use it to pretend that things haven't changed. Because they have." Sienna stands. She feels different. The world feels different. The structure that she'd been living inside her whole life just got revealed as something that could be changed. Something that wasn't inevitable. Something that only existed because people kept choosing to maintain it. "I want to help Davide," she says. "I want to get him the therapy he needs. I want to get him into schools that understand how he learns. I want him to have a life that isn't managed by medication and invisibility. That's what I want to do." Dominic nods. "Then do it. Use the resources. Use whatever money you need. Your brother deserves that. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because what happens next is going to determine whether this family survives or dissolves completely. The empire is fracturing, the secrets are starting to surface, and the future of the Russo family is no longer determined by men making decisions in darkness. It's going to be determined by whether anyone chooses compassion over legacy. Drop a comment and tell me what you think Sienna should do next. Should she try to save the family or let it fall? Your perspective matters. 3 weeks have passed. The world changes in ways that nobody anticipated. The federal investigation that was supposed to take months accelerates because people start cooperating. Associates of Dominic, who were worried about becoming victims of his organization, decide that cooperating with federal agents is safer than maintaining silence. Judges who'd been paid to make certain decisions start creating paper trails that protect themselves by incriminating Dominic. Shipping companies that had been processing Russo cargo without questions suddenly hire lawyers and start explaining exactly how much they were paid to be complicit. The empire doesn't collapse like a dramatic explosion. It collapses the way that all corrupt systems collapse. Slowly at first, then faster, then completely. Vittorio tries to assume control, but the control he's trying to assume doesn't exist anymore. The lieutenants who used to answer to Dominic are too busy protecting themselves to serve anyone else. The drug dealers and smugglers who used to distribute through Russo channels are finding new routes that don't lead to federal indictment. The money that used to flow through the organization is starting to dry up because people are transferring it to accounts that can't be frozen by the government. Dominic doesn't resist what's happening. He's made a choice. He's decided that the empire was built on something toxic, and that letting it fail is actually the most responsible thing he can do. He's starting to understand. through conversations with Sienna that happen late at night in the penthouse, that love and control are not the same thing, and that maintaining power through cruelty creates a situation where everyone loses eventually anyway. Davide is in a new school, a school for children with autism spectrum disorder, a school where his differences aren't seen as defects but as variations in how brains process information. A school where there are other children like him. A school where he's visible and accepted and allowed to be exactly who he is without modification or medication-based compliance. The change in him is remarkable. His stimming is still there, but it's no longer something he's being punished for. It's understood as his nervous system's way of regulating itself. His social interactions are still challenging, but they're no longer being forced into neurotypical patterns. His development is slower in some areas and faster in others, but nobody's deciding that slower is bad or different is wrong. And Sienna is the one who made this happen. Sienna is the one who decided that her youngest brother's life was worth more than her position in the family. Sienna is the one who chose compassion, and that choice has changed everything. Francesca comes back, not because Dominic asked her to, but because she heard what happened at the gala. She heard that her youngest son was finally seen. She heard that her departure had been vindicated. She heard that the structure she couldn't participate in anymore was finally starting to change. She returns to the penthouse not as Dominic's wife, but as Davide's mother. She's a grandmother now to nobody, but she takes that role anyway, making sure that her youngest child has everything he needs to thrive. The federal indictment arrives at exactly 6 weeks, like Dominic said it would. The charges are extensive: money laundering, organized crime, obstruction of justice, interstate trafficking, conspiracy to commit violence. There are enough charges to keep him in federal prison for the rest of his life if he doesn't cooperate. And he decides to cooperate because he's made a choice to stop participating in the system that he built. His cooperation doesn't save him. It doesn't reduce his sentence. But it does help other people. It helps federal agents prosecute judges who've been taking bribes. It helps them trace money to politicians who've been selling decisions. It helps them understand how the system of corruption works and where its weak points are. Vittorio disappears. Nobody knows where he goes. But the assumption is that he's trying to rebuild something out of the rubble of what his father built. The assumption is that he's trying to find associates who are still willing to do business with a Russo. The assumption is that he hasn't learned what Sienna learned, which is that some things are worth destroying if the alternative is letting them continue hurting people. The penthouse is sold. The Russo empire is dismantled. The money that Sienna has access to, and there is still money, money that was hidden in accounts that don't get frozen, money that Dominic gave to Sienna before the indictment arrived, is enough for her and Davide to live comfortably for the rest of their lives if they're careful. But Sienna doesn't want to live in the penthouse. She doesn't want to live in Chicago. She decides to move to a smaller city. A place where nobody knows her name. A place where Davide can go to school and be a kid instead of being defined by what his family did. She applies to college. She studies social work, which is ironic in ways that she appreciates. She's going to spend her life helping families like hers figure out how to choose compassion instead of control. She's going to help children like her brother, who've been made invisible by systems that confuse disability with defect. The Russo name becomes the name of a crime family that federal prosecutors use in training. It becomes a case study in how organized crime operates and why it eventually collapses. It becomes a story that people tell about what happens when you build an empire on cruelty. But that's not the story that Sienna tells. The story she tells is about a 5-year-old boy who went to a gala and smiled. The story she tells is about what it means to be visible. The story she tells is about what real power actually is. Subscribe and turn on notifications because the final chapter is about to explain what happened to everyone involved in this story. What happened to Davide as he grew up? What happened to Dominic in prison? What happened to all the people who were part of the system? The ending will surprise you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you were Sienna? What do you think real power actually is? 20 years later, Davide Russo is 25 years old. He lives in an apartment with his own job. He works with autistic children, helping them navigate a world that wasn't built for how their brains work. He's not a typical adult. He still stims. He still has sensory sensitivities. He still processes information in ways that are different from most people. But he's thriving. He has friends. He has people who understand him and accept him and don't try to make him into something else. He has a life that he's built himself, not a life that was assigned to him or managed by other people. Sienna is his social worker, not officially, but she checks in with him. She makes sure he has what he needs. She understands him in ways that only someone who's paid attention to the small details of his existence can understand. And he knows that she chose him. She chose him when choosing him meant destroying everything else in her life. Dominic died in federal prison 5 years ago. He died quietly, without fanfare or news coverage. He died as someone other than the man he'd been at the beginning of the story. He died having spent his time in prison reflecting on the choices he made and the cost of those choices. He died having written letters to his children that some of them have never read and probably never will. Vittorio disappeared into the criminal underworld and became one of those names that nobody says out loud anymore. The stories about him gradually stopped. The people who knew him gradually forgot. He exists now as a historical artifact instead of as a present threat. The penthouse sold to someone else, who immediately renovated it. The ballroom where the dance happened is no longer called a ballroom anymore. It's just a private event space, and if the new owners know the history of it, they don't acknowledge it. But the story doesn't end there. Sienna has a daughter now. A daughter with a partner who understands that Sienna needs to pass on the lesson that she learned at a charity gala. That real power is the willingness to see what others are trained to ignore. That real strength is the choice to love something even when love costs everything. She teaches her daughter about her Uncle David. She teaches her why visible love is revolutionary. She teaches her that the world is built on systems of invisibility, and that challenging those systems might seem small, but actually transforms everything. She's written a book. Not for money. She didn't need money. But for the people who needed to read it. The book tells the story of what happened that night. It tells the story of what it means to grow up in a family built on control. It tells the story of what happens when one person decides that compassion is more important than legacy. The book has been read by thousands of people. Social workers use it in training. Families dealing with autistic children use it to understand what real acceptance looks like. People dealing with their own invisible family members use it to understand why visibility matters. Davide read the book. He read the story of his own life told from his sister's perspective. He read about the night he went to a gala and smiled without understanding why smiling mattered so much. He read about the ripple effects of that smile and how it changed everything for everyone. He gave the book back to Sienna one day and said something that she'll probably remember for the rest of her life. He said, "I'm glad my smile meant something. I didn't know it meant something, but I'm glad." That's the end of the story, really. That's where it all comes together. That's where you understand that power isn't what you thought it was. That's where you understand that the most revolutionary act in a world built on control and invisibility is the simple choice to see someone and acknowledge their worth and refuse to participate in the collective agreement to ignore what's uncomfortable. Davide is visible now. Dominic is dead. The empire is gone. Vittorio is forgotten. And Sienna is building a different kind of legacy. A legacy built on compassion instead of control. A legacy that says that real love means sacrifice. And real power means the willingness to be vulnerable. The story of the Russo family is over. But the story of what it means to choose compassion is just beginning. And if you're watching this, if you're listening to this story about a girl who asked her brother to dance, then you're part of that story now. You're part of the group of people who understand that visible love is revolutionary. You're part of the group of people who understand that the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to ignore what matters most. Subscribe so you don't miss the next story about people who chose compassion over comfort. Turn on notifications so you know when we upload stories that inspire. And drop a comment and tell me, what did this story make you think about? Did it change how you see power? Did it make you think about the people in your life who are being made invisible? Share your thoughts, share your experiences, tell your stories. Because the more we talk about real power, the more people understand that it's not about control. It's about love. And love is the only thing that actually changes everything. This is where the Russo family story ends. But this is where your story continues. What are you going to do with what you've learned? Money doesn't make you powerful. Knowing what everyone else is willing to ignore makes you dangerous. That's what the man standing 50 stories above Chicago understands better than anyone alive. His name is Dominic Russo, and tonight he's about to lose control of the only thing that matters, though he doesn't know it yet. The penthouse windows stretch across the entire east wall. Floor-to-ceiling glass. Beyond them, Lake Michigan spreads out like hammered steel, reflecting a sky that's turning from gold to ash. The sun is dying, and Dominic watches it happen with the same controlled expression he uses for everything. A man who's learned that feelings are the first thing that gets you killed in his world. His office smells like aged leather and something else, something that costs more per ounce than most people's monthly rent. On the desk sits a single crystal glass filled with amber liquid. On the walls hang paintings that museums have tried to buy. In the corner, a Rolex sits beside a phone that connects to people who've never met face-to-face but understand each other perfectly. This is the kind of power that doesn't need to speak. It just needs to exist. Dominic adjusts his cufflinks. Italian silk. Custom-tailored. Everything about him says someone has decided exactly how much space he deserves in the world, and everyone else has learned to make room. His gray hair is swept back. His jawline still cuts like a blade even at 58. His eyes are dark, the kind that people describe differently depending on whether they like him or fear him. Most people do both. Before we start, make sure to hit like and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The phone on his desk buzzes. Not the special one. The regular one that connects him to the real world. His secretary's voice comes through, careful and measured, the way people sound when they're delivering information they know someone doesn't want to hear. Mr. Russo, the car is ready. The drivers are in position. The caterers have confirmed all dietary restrictions, and security has cleared the ballroom. He doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he takes a slow sip of his drink. The taste is clean, expensive, The kind of thing people use to mark important moments. Tonight is important. Not for the reasons the city of Chicago thinks. Not because of the children's hospital benefit being announced. Not because of the tax write-offs and the charitable donations that will wash across every news station by morning. Tonight matters because it's the night his federal indictment officially arrives. The U.S. Attorney has been working on this for 3 years. Dominic knows because he pays people to tell him things that nobody else is supposed to know. 6 weeks. That's how long he has before the charges land. 6 weeks to position himself as a legitimate businessman, a family man, a philanthropist. 6 weeks to make sure that when the cameras point in his direction, what they see is a man building futures for children, not dismantling them. He sets down his glass and walks toward the window. Below, Chicago unfolds in a grid of lights and streets. Somewhere down there are the people he's helped. Also, somewhere down there are the people he's hurt. Neither group is going anywhere. Power doesn't work that way. It just keeps compounding, getting heavier, dragging you deeper. The thing about being Dominic Russo is that everyone knows your name. Judges know your name. Politicians know your name. Federal agents know your name and have a file on you that's probably thicker than a phone book. Banks don't ask questions about your money because they've learned that questions lead to complications. Shipping companies process your cargo without inspecting it too carefully. The thing about being this powerful is that everyone participates in your success, because everyone has something to lose if they don't. But tonight, in the penthouse above the city, there's something else happening. Something he can't control with money or favors or the kind of quiet phone calls that make problems disappear. Tonight, his youngest son will be at the gala. 5 years old. Autistic. A secret that Dominic has kept locked away like contraband. Hidden in the top floors of this building. Hidden from the business associates. Hidden from the rivals. Hidden from the media that's always watching. Dominic's jaw tightens slightly. Just barely perceptible. The kind of movement that most people would miss unless they were trained to watch for it. His fingers curl into a fist, then release. Control. That's the word that defines him. That's what he built his empire on. The ability to control every variable, every outcome, every person involved. But 5-year-olds don't understand control. They don't understand the Russo family code. They don't understand that perfection is non-negotiable, that weakness is unforgivable, that a disabled child is a liability that needs to be managed, not loved. The phone buzzes again. His driver this time. Confirmation that the car is downstairs, that everything is ready, that the night of optics and performance can begin. Dominic takes one last look at Lake Michigan. The sun is almost gone now. The water is turning black. And somewhere in the building, his youngest son is being prepared for a night where nobody will look at him, where he'll be positioned in corners and shadowed by staff members whose job is to ensure he doesn't embarrass the family, where the collective decision has already been made. This child is invisible. What none of them know, what Dominic can't predict with all his money and influence and careful planning, is that invisibility is about to become the most powerful force in the room. And it will start with someone asking a 5-year-old boy to dance. That's when everything changes. That's when the whole careful structure of the Russo Empire begins its quiet collapse, and no amount of power can stop what's coming next.